Where do these $10,000 numbers get decided?
I think the biggest mistakes are made on the buy. They overpaid for the land. They assumed they could create a product in a market that wasn't ready for the product that they were assuming they could create.
Joining us is Jay Parker, CEO of Douglas Elliman's Florida brokerage and president of its Florida Development Marketing Division. A former real estate attorney, Jay has helped transform Douglas Elliman into a statewide luxury powerhouse and now oversees a $30 billion new development pipeline, shaping the future of Florida real estate.
They're taking on a time risk. How long will it take for the developer to get to 50%, to get a construction loan? How long will it then take for the developer to build the product? What can I afford to pay for this land? What's the land really worth? What do I actually envision the product being? How much can I sell that product for?
Get ready for an inside look at South Florida's new development market, the decisions made behind closed doors, and the strategies shaping the next generation of luxury real estate. This is Better Decisions.
Everybody covers the new development projects after the sales gallery opens. And that's the wrong end of the story. By the time there's a rendering, every decision that determines whether a project makes money has already been made. Unit mix, ceiling height, the operator, the terrace ratios, the unit count, the pricing. The people in the room for those decisions are a developer, a lender, an architect, and occasionally a broker. Welcome back to the Better Decisions podcast. I'm David Siddons. Today, I had the absolute pleasure of being with a very long-time friend, an industry-recognized individual. I am not going to go and ask you to introduce yourself and talk about your, where you come from and who you are, because if you don't know, you should. This is Jay Parker, CEO of Douglas Elliman, and today we're going to have a slightly different conversation that we might normally do about the industry in general. We're going to get into new development, and we're going to talk about the room before the room, what goes on behind closed doors. Jay, you're responsible as CEO of Douglas Elliman and you corrected me before the camera started rolling, $30 billion of new development pipeline in South Florida. What does that look like right now? Just give everyone a breakdown of what that landscape currently looks like.
I mean, first of all, David, it's truly an honor. Not only have we known each other for decades, but to watch your business expand, grow, evolve, and to be a participant on your podcast means the world to me. I admire you. I respect you.
Jay, thank you.
And, when you say, and sometimes brokers are in the room, we're fortunate to have you in that room oftentimes helping to shape those pre-development decisions. So thank you for being here, and I hope we can bring some value to the listeners. $30 billion is a huge number. A lot of that speaks to the caliber of the projects that we're representing. Having multi-$100 million and billion-dollar projects is something that has become a staple in our portfolio. I think we're fortunate to be working with some of the best developers in the world, people that understand how to extract from all the professionals that you've mentioned, the best in class. And the best in this class means, in not many cases, the best in the world. We're defining territories, we're breaking boundaries, we're setting precedent, and we're doing it in a space that has an appetite to absorb it, and developers that have the vision, the creativity, the risk to do it. And I'm just thrilled that we have the opportunity to work with people that we're working with to do the things that we're doing. And, the diversity of our projects are wide. I mean, from Jacksonville to Ponte Vedra and places like now we're working more on the west coast of Florida and Sarasota and looking at some things in St. Petersburg and Tampa. Great stuff in Miami, Coral Gables, Coconut Grove, Miami Beach, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach. I mean, it's vast. And we're seeing many of the characteristics that we've established here sort of permeating into some of the other markets that share the characteristics that we're seeing in Florida.
The pipeline of $30 billion is a huge number. And there's even more coming from other areas, other quadrants, other developers that are out there in the market. And one of the things that's really become the conversation about South Florida is the price points, the level that we're at, this new stratosphere that has just shocked the world. There was something that you were on a podcast previously, and I like to research my guests, and I obviously know you, but I wanted to hear what was being said. And you were on a podcast with Jay Roberts, who, I've had him on the show as well. Again, a very well-known developer. He himself develops. And there was a comment that was made, and I think it's kind of indicative of what we're seeing, this ultra luxury product, where you mentioned for the first time $10,000 per square foot being broken in a ceiling in South Florida, which just like that, just if that doesn't blow the top of your head off, what does that actually mean? Like, what does that actually mean when you say that? Because sometimes people don't fully
Well,
understand it.
I remember when we launched the Edition residences in Miami Beach with the Faena house, the idea of $3,000 a foot was somewhat unheard of. And I remember our former chairman and my mentor, dear friend Howard Lorber, making a comment by saying, "Hey, look, when you want to sell something for $3,000 a foot, look to New York, where a product is $6,000 to $7,000 a foot, and it's like a deal." Today, that equation is somewhat flipped. This is the most desirable market in the country, I believe, for many reasons. And I think that people are willing to pay for product here in a way that they have never, ever considered before. And so when you look at price per square foot, to take it back even further, I remember when we launched, not at Douglas Elliman, but I was a lawyer at the time, and they launched a project called Apogee on what was then the Alaskan parcel, the last developable parcel in south of Fifth. And people had talked about ideas like $1,000 a foot. And I thought that was just unbelievable. $1,000 a square foot. We're going to be buying units for $3 and $4 million sounded incredible. Today, you're lucky if you can find something south of Fifth for $3 or $4 million. Forget about buying a product at $1,000 a foot. We are working on a project that we haven't launched yet, so I'm not going to be specific as to which project it is, but it has very low density. It has an incredible brand associated with it that brings forward legacy, history, pedigree, lifestyle, and with so few units in the building, an incredible beachfront site with a great beachfront exposure, an extraordinary southern and southwestern exposure, and really nothing to be developed to its south, you have an opportunity to push limits. And like places like Indian Creek Island and Lagorce Island and buildings like Apogee, where scarcity creates demand, there's an opportunity to set the bar at a level that I think very few will be able to obtain, but many want. And so we're anticipating numbers to reach in excess of $10,000 a foot on that product. It will probably come out a little bit lower. We haven't fully priced the building yet. But we're looking at units that are going to probably start in the mid-20s to $30 million and go up from there for $4,000, 4,000 square feet.
And we'll get into the types of buyers who are buying this, because understanding how you market these products and whether you price at this kind of level, to price at this level requires some research, some understanding of who the buying pool is. And it doesn't just get plucked out of the sky where you go, oh, okay, let's just come up with this number. But in this cycle, I've noticed, and we've seen, we've had, again, the projects we've been involved with, the Shore Club. Shore Club had a penthouse, $120 million. We've had what we call top-down sales, where buildings are not selling from the cheapest to the most expensive. We're going from the most expensive to the least. People are chewing off the biggest units that they can find, the trophy ones. And that gets into the conversation of when projects come up, what do you go after? We had the same thing with the Mandarin Oriental. It had its 2 penthouses both sold, and those were over $50 million each. When you see this kind of level, but that's not what I wanted to just talk about today. I want to talk about the room where the numbers get decided. Where do these $10,000 numbers get decided? Which was about 3 years before anyone puts it on a price sheet, before it even comes in. Who's sitting in the room? Talk us through. I'm trying to imagine what that room would look like to make that kind of decision.
There are different scenarios. There's certain discussions that we're brought into by investors, lenders, developers at different phases. Sometimes we get a phone call from a developer before they've acquired a site. Sometimes that conversation is very specific. Sometimes it's more evasive. They know that we're in the market. They know that we're talking to lots of people. While I can assure you, David, that we're very careful to retain information confidentially, to be respectful of the people that provide us with information, we don't even want to be put in the position where we could be suggested to have released information. So sometimes those conversations are very preliminary. They've identified a site. They want our opinion on the location. Sometimes they ask us, which we don't answer clearly, what else is coming in the market around that area. If it's not announced, we don't announce it. But we can give a sense as to what the market is speaking, what the market is thinking, what kinds of feedback we're getting from buyers today, from brokers. And that's why we engage you and the few others of your caliber in those discussions. What are you hearing from your clients? The pricing discussion evolves. I mean, there are buildings that candidly we're quite conservative in pricing because it's never a good thing to tell a developer one thing and then have to come back to them and say we're not going to be able to achieve it. And it's another and much more positive thing to say, hey, look, we feel comfortable at X dollars per square foot or absolute price points of Y, and then have the market outperform us. And that's also a very specific characteristic of the way we do business: release strategies, pricing strategies, velocity measurement. So when we do price a building, we anticipate that that will be the initial pricing. And that leads to something we quickly discussed before the mics came on about the timing of investing in new construction. There's undoubtedly, in the projects that we're selling, an opportunity at the infancy of a project. You're coming in earlier, your time frame for exit is longer, your risk factor is higher, but in most cases, your pricing is lower because we want to make sure that we de-risk the project for the developer and their partners. So getting those initial few sales out of the gate is very important. So we contemplate that. There's other projects we've worked on Miami Beach where we knew that we were going to blend at $2,500, $3,000 a square foot, and by the time the project close to being completed, we're almost double that because the market's working to our benefit.
Yeah.
It's not magic. There's a lot of variables in this country, outside of this country, that are pushing more and more people to our market. It's helping us to create demand. And with scarcity of product at this level and the demand being as robust as it is, combined with the single family home market being as tight as it is, it allows us to push the envelope. And we pay attention to our product. We pay attention to our inventory. We try to study the market. One of the pillars of our business is research and intelligence. We are constantly studying the market to understand what's coming out, what's trading. And it's hard, as you well know.
Right.
Most of new development sales information is not released until the buildings close. But because we have a good sense and sort of our fingers on the market in most of the markets that we're in, we have the opportunity to get a good gauge of what's moving, what's not, where there's pressure, where there's not, and we adjust accordingly. And I think that's important.
This whole conversation, just the infancy of this conversation came out in my mind because a call came through from Dee's central office and said, would you be part of a panel where the developer is going to ask you questions? They're thinking of doing a project and they would like to soundboard with agents who sell the product to get a sense of whether they're working in the right direction. And the questions revolved interestingly around, and I want to ask you kind of like what you get asked. But the interesting conversation was it was very thorough. The first thing that struck me was that it was a it was like I won't say a deck, but it took me a good couple of hours to answer all the questions. I sat down the night before we did this and I went through all these questions, and there was a lot of good questions in there that were clearly well thought out. And it was like, what's the importance of branding, and does this matter and does that matter, and let's talk about unit size, and let's talk about pricing strategy. And it was something that I could tell had been formatted previously, that it's a strategy to really get the right information out of the top agents so they can make a better decision in terms of how they price it out. And what really made me think was, I personally have been on the end of it, where I've bought new construction projects very, very early, and I recognized this is going to work, this may not work.
Right.
And I'm curious to know, walk me through the last time a developer called you before they closed on, let's say, a piece of land. What did they, because I know what they're asking me, what did they ask you? And what did you tell them that changed the building?
Two very separate questions. When it comes to the calls from developers, I had a call last night, literally 7:00 at night, gave me a location. They were pretty specific about the location, asked me about pricing. What do I think about unit size? Who do I think the buyer is? Do I think that in this particular case, there was a live-work component? Do I think that would have a detrimental impact on the opportunity? Would it have what kind of an impact would it have on pricing? Overall, what was the competitive landscape? What did I think the competitive product would be? Did it compare to this community or that community? Who would what would the amenities look like for that type of buyer? A lot of things I sometimes think they know, but they just want to kind of understand what our perspective would be on that. Going back to the other part of the question, what do we change? We have a very disciplined consultancy-based operation. When I first joined Douglas Elliman almost 13, 14 years ago, I didn't really understand as much about the brokerage business as I do today, and I certainly didn't understand the development marketing business. To me, it was about sales. But what we're talking about today is everything that happens before the sale. And it's a highly disciplined, professional approach. We look at research and intelligence. We try to understand benchmarks for all of the elements that go into the product. What amenities are competitive? Things like I never thought about, indoor lap pools. I continually am amazed by the fact that in Florida, you would ever need an indoor lap pool. Never really contemplated the fact that swimming laps is a very good way of exercising, particularly as you get older. It's very easy on your joints. And if you're into it for health and wellness, you probably don't want to be under the sun for an hour while you're swimming in a lap pool. A lap pool could make sense as an indoor amenity. You start to think about the positioning of amenities. Where do they go in the building? Surely everybody wants their gym to be looking out at the ocean or looking out at the greatest view corridor possible, but sometimes that space is more important for sellable square footage than it is for amenity space. So understanding that a buyer might accept for a facility's amenities component to be below ground or perhaps not have the best view corridor. We shape with our developers almost every single part of the building that a buyer will ultimately see. The floor plans, the allocation of space, the balcony size, the access to the balcony, the incorporation of indoor-outdoor space, the ceiling heights, the lighting packages, furnished or unfurnished, even things as basic as what we used to call developer finished or developer ready versus completed. Things like how important is it to have a private elevator, or can we get around that? And if you don't have a private elevator, what are you going to do to the elevator or hallway walkways to accentuate the experience? Access. How important is it to have access in one location versus another location? We deal with pricing almost every day, from the beginning of a process right until the last sale is completed, because it's constantly in flux. And I oftentimes tell our team that what we're doing in development marketing is a living organism. You don't set it and forget it. And it's the same thing. And
that's very true.
We were on a call today, David, right, with the Well Coconut Groves. Every single part of the project is constantly being evaluated, dealing with the salespeople, understanding the feedback, understanding what buyers are telling you, understanding what prospects are telling you, what's hindering a deal getting done, what's helping a deal to get done. All that information is captured and stored by us so that we can leverage it to the benefit of the overall market. And so I think that every single part of what could impact the building are things that we're actively involved in shaping. There are circumstances where we come into a project after it's been conceived, after it's even been developed, and candidly, we see things that were done that perhaps would have been done differently if we were a part of it. I'll give you a great example. You're selling a project with $1 million to $1.5 million units that have wine storage units for sale. The buyer of $1 million unit is probably not going to have a big enough wine collection to buy a wine storage unit, but he might need storage. So scale back the wine storage unit and use it as a storage facility. You might be able to sell it. Fire-rated doors that are opaque and don't have color, don't have windows or light, could be replaced with fire-rated doors that have windows that allow light to pass through. So there's a lot of things that we see. Hindsight's always 20/20. But I think we have a powerful impact on what we do. I think that's why developers use us. And I think that once we conceive the project, working together with the professionals like yourself to actively manage the sales team, collaborate with them, answer to what their needs are, and make sure that they're getting what they need in terms of support and tools and reach, make us the best at what we do.
Yeah, I've noticed the right developers, the ones that we choose, because again, we don't work with all the developers out there. You choose who you're going to work with. It's not a one-way conversation. It's not like, okay, well, we'll just put, we'll step up and we'll take anything. The right developers, and again, having worked extensively with people like David Martin, there's a lot of sandboarding that goes on, but there's an absolute awareness of the audience, and there's the old poker saying, play the player, don't play the game. Once you know who the players are and you know who the consumers are who are buying this, and you're actually building for them, not a vanity, not building because, hey, I have this idea of doing this like great building.
Right.
If you read the room, and it's about having the agents in the room, having the brokers in the room who are on the ground with the clients, like we are every single day, and saying, what do they actually want and need? And
Exactly right.
once you get that, and this is what we have conversations all the time, and even as you go through the process for the project, there's always sometimes a little bit of a pivot where they're like, does the audience really want that? Like you said, to my mind, you're absolutely right. Guy who's buying $1.5 million unit doesn't have a wine collection.
Right.
He doesn't care. It's not his thing. But in the same time, when you get to, let's say, the large resort scale projects and you're going to sell a really expensive unit, it better be well amenitized, because this is going to become someone's primary residence.
Yeah.
And then it changes from the traditional model. Now, the model's really changed. And I think one of the most important things to touch on is how the Miami today, not just in terms of numbers, because obviously it means a different type of buyer, but the actual profile and the entire behavior of the development landscape is shifted. Going back to 2012, 13, 14, 15, we were catering, or it felt like we were catering to a lot of the investment class buyers.
And second, third homes.
Second, third homes. Today, that's not the case.
Yeah.
We're dealing with primary buyers, end users, who it's going to make it their home, whether they're empty nesters or they're relocating, whether they're domestic or international.
Well, David, we've also seen an absolute explosion of values in single-family homes. So for many of those owners that have owned those properties here in beautiful Coral Gables, Coconut Grove, Miami Beach, something that they bought for a couple $1 million 20, 30 years ago is now being able to get $30 million. They need an alternative.
Yeah.
And they're not looking to move into a traditional split floor plan, downtown Brickell Avenue building. They want something that's going to match the quality of life that they're used to, but with the turnkey benefits of a luxury condominium.
Yep.
So it's given us a new palette to work from. I just wanted to touch on what you said about David Martin, and I find that thread of brilliance in many of the people that I work with. Varying calibers, varying characteristics and personalities, but I find that we're most successful when we work together with developers that want to hear what the agents want to say. They want to hear what we have to say. Doesn't mean they're going to do it. They make the final decisions. But the more collaborative, the more open, the more interested, it facilitates two things. Number one, they're gathering the data. But it also encourages someone like you to sit in a meeting like that and not just say, hey, I'm here to sell units. I'm actually here to contribute.
Well, this is different because the in-house teams, like we would have I'm going to say this, and it probably won't be the most popular comment that I'm going to say today, but we would have an inside joke amongst general real estate agents that when you go to a lot of projects, we would call in-house agents house cats, because they live in a house and they do well. But if you take them outside, they get murdered really quickly. And that happens when you have agents who don't have the optics of what's going out in the general real estate market. Now, within Douglas Elliman, the projects, and again, the Well's a good example, when he put together that team, there's Susan Trevis, there's Michael Lai, there's Jamie Light, Chantal, myself, David Vasquez. And we said to him at the time, you do realize that the team you're putting together sells a lot of general real estate. We're outspoken. If we don't like something, we'll tell you, because we'll work in the project, but we don't need to work in the project. We have other general real estate business to do. And he took that on board, and I think he embraced it. And what it meant was that you were going to get a legitimate soundboard. You weren't going to get, the emperor's wearing no clothes, where everyone says, you're amazing, it's great, just do it.
Never happens.
Doesn't happen.
No, look, I credit Susan DeFranza, my mentor in this business, with the idea that the best on-site agent for a luxury project is an agent that has the discipline and experience of a general realtor. We're not taking orders in these projects. We're not selling strip homes. We're selling high-end luxury works of art. It takes the expertise. It takes the market savvy. It takes the credibility and relationships that people like yourself have to be able to convince someone at these numbers to be able to make a move, and not only make a move, but in many cases put down a 30, 40, 50% deposit for something that may not be ready for years. So the idea that the general realtor is committing their time to something like this, as you all know, is a big statement for both the project and the real estate professional, because you're allocating an extraordinary amount of time to something that's going to take years to develop. I love it because I think it builds upon our general real estate agent's business. It creates an expertise for them in a building that they ultimately will own and hold on to. And I think for the developers, it brings a level of professionalism, experience, credibility, reach, and input that they wouldn't get from that order taker. So it is a different evolution to our business. And sometimes developers are, sort of reluctant. How are they going to focus on my project if they're busy with their general real estate business? I say, well, that will come out very quickly. And you've seen people like yourselves and the other members of your team that have robust businesses are selling like hotcakes. I mean, I think we're about 60% sold in that project in under a year. So
Absolutely.
it's a different approach to the way we do business, but it's an opportunity for both developers and agents to build another side of their business.
And in that process, we're also getting input for our own markets and our own conversations. The understanding, the lever on price per square foot. I want to hear your opinion on what you consider to be the single biggest lever on price per square foot before they even come out on the drawing. Because I think that is like, is it unit count? Is it ceiling height? Is it the operator? Is it terrace ratios? Like, I'd love you to kind of rank them together or put them in what you've observed, because you're handling a lot of product.
The number one element is location. Right? It's just the number one element. It's not always the case, but in Florida, it seems to me that your highest price point's always going to be on the oceanfront, unobstructed residence with low density. Scarce inventory creates higher demand. I'm not sure that the brand is the number one defining characteristic for pushing price.
Glad you said that.
It could either work very positively towards the value, or it could be somewhat neutral positive. But I think it comes down to the consummation of all of those elements together. Sometimes balcony space can be too big. And I don't know about you, David, but I find that it's sort of an over anticipated element of the building. How much time do people actually spend on their balconies? So we've seen in some of our projects that you don't need balconies as big as we sometimes contemplated, but there is a threshold. There is a benchmark that our team has identified, and you basically need enough space to be able to entertain, host a dinner, have a dining room table, have some lounge chairs, sometimes an outdoor kitchen. But bigger than that is oftentimes wasted space, and as you know, it's not technically sellable space.
It's also how it's structured. I wanted to dive on that comment because these are really good points. Terraces, and again, I live in a single family home. My terrace that I use is covered. It's a covered terrace. I have a barbecue area, and I have ways to bring the furniture in and put it outside if I have to. It's a house, so I'm not, 60 stories high. The realities of the environment are important, and understanding the environment is really key. And I've noticed that with lower level buildings, more boutique buildings, the desire for bigger terraces becomes more fundamentally useful as long as the terrace is covered, and as long as you've also got a way to make it function and work systematically with the kitchen living room area. My terrace on my house is set off my kitchen and my living room, as most people's are.
Right.
Now, if that barbecue area, that terrace area, was below or above where the rest of my living space was, it probably wouldn't work as well. And I think how that's structured there is important, because look, we've seen buildings before that would said, we have a terrace and it's not covered, and the only thing that you see is the AC vents around you, and there's no way to bring the furniture in, and it's 50 stories high where the wind's going to pick up and it doesn't become a form of function.
Yeah, there is a functionality aspect, and there's also a usability component that we take into consideration. We have a team, as I mentioned, one of our pillars was research and intelligence. Another one is planning and design.
Yeah.
On our design team, we have several in many cases, Ivy League educated architects that work in conjunction with the project's architect. And in those discussions, we're looking deeply into the functionality of the space. We're looking at how usable that space becomes and creating the story, the narrative that we're going to share with our sales team. Imagine sitting with your family, watching a sporting event, having the ability to walk outside onto an indoor-outdoor terrace with collapsible windows and doors, and being able to enjoy a great outdoor kitchen dining experience while the sun's setting in the horizon. You can't do that if the terrace is off the master suite or the primary bedroom.
Yeah.
And so those elements of lifestyle and space planning come very succinctly into our discussions at the infancy of the project's phases. By the way, you also mentioned contemplating optionality. You said that sometimes when you're selling a project, what you once thought was going to be the case changes, and we've seen that, and we've started to contemplate that. So taking two bedrooms and actually contemplating what they look like as a combination unit, so that you create a larger 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom, sometimes even larger, taking 2 penthouse units and imagining what those.
We've seen a lot of that. That's actually an interesting point that you raised, because given the diversity of buyers that we're dealing with right now, and sometimes I think we've not intentionally, but I think fortuitously underestimated the appetite of the buying market. And I remember back when Park Grove was being built, David Martin built Tower 2. And then at the time, that's when I first met him, and he started to ask me questions about, marketing, because I started doing a lot of video content about the building. And he was like, who's this guy who keeps doing a lot of stuff about Park Grove? I want to chat with him. And then when he was doing Tower 1, he met with a handful of top agents and said, what do you think about this? Do you think I should do the same as I did in Tower 2, or should I make my units bigger? And the conversation turns to, well, if people want a bigger unit, we can combine units.
Right.
And I think the architectural flexibility that's now created with modern design is allowing for more integration of units together without compromising the original design plan.
Well, it's 2 factors. On the one hand, taking the conservative approach, it's easier to combine 2 units than to break 2 units down.
For sure.
For a lot of reasons, zoning, unit count limitations. So the idea of bringing 2 units together, it de-risks the investment. Right? You can sell 2 less expensive units, which is generally easier than selling much larger units. But it also provides the architectural flexibility to offer somebody something different, something more than what they might have anticipated. So it's a great tool that we've worked with many developers to contemplate now, and it works. It really does work. In fact, sometimes we've seen larger combinations, 3 units being combined, entire floors being combined, and it's an attractive solution. It oftentimes requires a lot of work on the developer side, because then they're involved in.
Yeah, it does. I think it requires, and I see this being on the inside, a willingness for developers saying, yeah, this is going to make more work for us, but we're willing to do it to keep the audience happy.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's where the smaller, less commodity type products provide for this level of flexibility. If you're doing a building with 600 units, you're not likely to engage in modifications to 2 units to secure a buyer. When you're doing a building with 100 units, that discussion is much easier. The floor plans are much more unified. You're not likely to have a dramatic impact on many of the other units in the building. And you're not creating a precedent that's going to be hard to duplicate. So it is something that we've contemplated. And when you talk about pricing, you also talk about balancing the pricing of a building. So we're always going to understand to some extent which view is going to be more desirable, which floor plan is going to be more desirable. You're constricted, right? You have a floor plate, you have common area space that you need, you have areas for elevators that you need, you have a core. Where do you put that core? Where's your best view corridor? So we kind of know ahead of time which angles will be the best, which location is going to be the best, which floor plans are going to look the best. Once we know that, we balance the sales around that so that we don't sell all the ones that are arguably most desirable, because I'm going to hold those, balance out the building by selling some of the units that are arguably still amazing, but perhaps less desirable, so that we can capture the buyer that can't afford the one unit, get them into the other unit, and balance it out. We've seen scenarios where, unfortunately, all the easier to sell units were sold, leaving some of the less desirable units to be
Yeah,
sold
from a
for the-
point of view, from a developer standpoint, that benefits the consumer. And I know a lot of people watching this are going to be consumers. So they're going to think to themselves as they listen to this, how can I take advantage of this situation? What can I use now? And with that in mind, I want to break down that dollar per square foot process, deciding and what the timing looks like, because I know some people understand the process and obviously looking behind the curtain to know what goes on in the conversation in the room. The initial dollar per square foot pricing that I've observed knows or warrants that the developer says, look, we want to get critical mass on this. We want to get going. We want to get sales under our belt.
Yeah.
And that means we're going to offer people some really good deals. So if you're the first to hear about this project, if you're the first to be aware of it, and thank God I'm at Douglas Elliman, because we get to be the guys in the room. So when we know a project's coming, we know it's coming long before it's ever hitting the press or anything else like that. So the dollar per square foot conversation when it launches and understanding how it is. And again, I'd love you to kind of break it down. You said something earlier on, which is, I've seen, and I'll quote you, dollar per square foot's double from the beginning of the project to the end.
Yeah.
That the appreciation, the appetite for that product has been so overwhelming. The developer obviously will increase, and we know they do it in draws. As you go through the process, it's a 3 or 4 year.
It's a number of things. I mean, the original pricing is a combination of a couple of things. First of all, the cost, right? Depending on the product that's being built, the basis in the land, we know and the developer knows, I have to sell this product for no less than X, or it doesn't make sense to build.
Yeah, the bank minimum.
Yeah, we call it minimum release price, right? But even before you get to a bank loan, the developer is going to say, it's going to cost me X number of dollars per foot in land cost, X number of dollars per foot in soft cost, and X number of dollars per foot to build it, which, by the way, they may not have guarantees on. So there's a little bit of expertise in that developer's vision as to what it's going to cost them to build. Once they know that number, they turn to us and say, hey, I need to sell this unit at a certain price, but what do you think we can sell it for? We tend to be very conservative. We're going to look at the comps. We're going to evaluate the market. We're going to base our discussions with our agents like you to say, hey, David, what do you think? Do you think we can sell this product for $2,500 a foot? Sometimes the feedback we get from our agents is absolutely not. You're never going to get there. Or it might be, hey, I don't have a problem with $2,500 a foot. What I have a problem with is $25 million in that location.
Yeah.
So your unit's too big, or the buyer's not willing to pay that price in that location. So we take all that information. What's the comp set? What's the baseline for the developer? Where do we really think we can generate some velocity? Because if we come out of the gates at a number that's too high and we get no sales and we're 6 months in, somehow you realtors always figure it out. And then you're coming at us saying, hey, we know you're not selling, gotta give me a deal. So we'd rather be on the other side of that equation saying, hey, look, we did right by your customers. We sold some units at $2,500 a foot. We knew we'd get to a higher number, but we've now sold 30% of the building. We're going to get a construction loan if we sell another 10, 15 units. We start pressing pricing. And we're going to press pricing methodically. Which units do we know are selling the most aggressively? We're going to go after those units and say, hey, we know we're going to sell these units. We've got 15 floors to sell. We've already sold 5 of those 15 floors. We've only got better floors to sell. We're going to sell them slow. And so that pricing process is very carefully watched, monitored, and evaluated. To me, the best advice you could give a client on a product that we're representing with a developer that has pedigree, reputation, success, track record, get in early. If you know you want to be there, get in early, because there's no doubt in my mind with these types of projects, you're going to realize an economic benefit. You're taking more risk, because when I say more risk, I don't believe, and I've not been a part of a project that has sold and not been built. But I don't believe that the risk is, will my money be safe? Will the project be built? You're taking on a time risk. How long will it take for the developer to get to 50%, to get a construction loan? How long will it then take for the developer to build the product? If that's 3 years, you're a winner. If that's 5 years, you're less of a winner.
Yeah.
So, and where will the market be? I'm a huge proponent of the Florida market for many reasons, which we don't have to get into. I know you agree with. I think this market is long. I think this opportunities for price appreciation will continue. Will we ever reach a point where the market's peaked? I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, but I can tell you that buying new construction today, I don't think you find yourself upside down in 3, 4, or 5 years.
I'll get into some of these numbers, because what I did was I looked back, and again, I like the figures and I like the numbers and I like to look and I like to get into the deals when I look at the dollar per square foot and I see what's transpired over the last, especially let's say 5 years, because that's really what matters right now for this conversation. And I early on bought into projects, which at the time, I bought into a project up on the beach and I won't go into the numbers, but I will exit out of that deal 200% up on my initial investment. That's 200% in a couple of years, which is unheard of. I bought into another project where the value's already doubled. And when I look at what's happened, again, we see it in the housing market, but I think that within the condo market, the reason this conversation exists and people want to know what's going on behind closed doors is because it's not as equal as it is in the housing market. The housing market, you could have pretty much bought anything in Coconut Grove or Coral Gables or Pinecrest in 2020, 2021 and made an absolute fortune, or Miami Beach, or pretty much anywhere as a single family home market. The condo market's different. The condo market, we've seen buildings come up and not appreciate at all. At the same time, we've also seen buildings like the Surf Club Four Seasons suddenly kind of double in value. Park Grove went from $1,500 a square foot. Top sale was nearly $4,000 a square foot now. I mean, we've seen a lot of buildings that's done extremely well. And we've seen, and you mentioned geography, location, because that's really important. We've seen different neighborhoods start to emerge as really, really popular places to be. And we've seen some neighborhoods that were touted as this is going to be the next greatest thing, not maybe do as well. And sometimes it's just because they were a little early to the game, and sometimes it takes time to mature. There is, there's a section here where I title "How Jay Says No," and the purpose is like the risk, the failure, and the alarm bells. And this is kind of like a sector that I know a lot of people are going to want to retain this information. The cost of being wrong, that outperforms best practice content every single time. And there are projects that we've seen not even happen. And this is the ugly truth of the business, where we see projects get announced. And you mentioned branding. And branding is kind of almost became a bit of a dirty word to a degree, because there's some phenomenal brands. There's some phenomenal developers. But there's also brands that get pushed where it's not really adding value. And I think developers now are actually, one of the questions that was put to me in this group decision of contacting agents and talking about whether to do a project, and it's happened multiple times, is the brand conversation, like what matters. And you mentioned geography. Geography is key, and I agree with you 100%. You've got to have the right location. I think that you've got to have the right combination within the building. Slapping a name on the side of the building doesn't qualify or quantify success. What's the fastest way to get you to walk away from wanting to do a project?
One of the things we look at is the buyer's financial wherewithal. It's a very difficult discussion because we're in the business of representing developers, and we want to work with people that are going to help us generate opportunities for our realtors, generate business for the company, help create great products. But when we doubt a developer's ability to execute, or we doubt the developer's pedigree, he has aspirational visions that are not consistent with what he's ever done before or she's ever done before, we pause. We're limited on our resources. We work with about 80 development marketing professionals at our company. There's only so much we can do. So we're more inclined to work with the developers that we have already been working with, that have a tried and true reputation, pedigree, and experience, than those that have never done it before, are new to the market, or haven't had the pedigree. So that's one of the first things we look at, which is quite frankly one of the things that many buyers look at.
Yeah.
What's the assurance that I'm going to get what I expect? I can tell you, for the vast majority of the developers we work with, they deliver, and their reputations stand behind what they deliver. So we want to be a part of that reputational equity, and the only way to do that is to align with the best in class. So saying no is very hard. But if it's someone whose ability we doubt, we're going to be upfront with them. And sometimes we'll encourage them to partner with a developer that has the reputation. Sometimes we'll just walk away. Sometimes for relationships, we end up involved in businesses that take a lot more time than we would like. The scope of the project is much larger than the economic realization. Sort of like your, best friend's sister asking you to sell their home for $600,000. It's hard. You want to do that for them. You want to be there for them. It's a very important personal relationship, but it's really not worth your time. Um, there are times when our company gets sort of pulled into those relationship type transactions. But generally speaking, if we don't believe in the developer's ability to execute at a level that's consistent with our brand, we're not going to do it. And we're recognized for leading the luxury market in all the markets that we're in. We don't want to work on products that aren't consistent with that vision. Is it absolutely always the case? No. Sometimes, we take on an opportunity that isn't perfect and has more challenges, and doesn't work out. But we've not had any of those scenarios that I can recall. The vast majority of the business we're doing is with top tier developers, developing the most reputable products in the market, delivering at a level that is even mind blowing for us. And you talk, by the way, about appreciation. There are exceptions to the rule, but an interesting component that we didn't discuss was the time frame to completion and the built versus new construction variable. If you have a product like, for example, 5 Park, which just completed, I think we have 1 unit remaining in that building. By the time people hear this, there'll probably be no units remaining. To me, I look at something like that. So I can move in today. I can put up a much smaller deposit than the person before me might have had to. I can move into something that is as sophisticated, as evolved, is as advanced, is as amenitized as anything else in the market, if not more so. I don't have to take the risk of pre-development from a timing perspective.
Yeah.
To me, that has a premium associated
Yeah,
with it.
there's a risk adversity that different buyers have different appetites for risk.
Right.
And it's a good point that you raised, because obviously a lot of the association is you're in the room early, you get to hear about great projects early. So therefore, if I talk to you, I'll get the heads up on things and I should just get in and buy immediately. But we know that we've been on enough projects that sometimes if that's not the way that you're built and timing for you is like, I need the immediate use, I need the immediate gratification.
Right.
I don't want to wait 3 or 4 years, because let's say I am the world's best hedge fund manager and I'm making 100% of my money every single year, then some of those buyers will come back and say, you know what, I'm going to wait, because the closeout sometimes reveals some really great product too. And I know sometimes on the front end, we say, well, sometimes you wait and the units don't become available, and the ones you want, those buyers are not selling under any circumstance. And then you've got a challenge.
Yeah.
But I wrote down in here, like, I've got my own personal alarm bells. And I put, what are the alarm bells? Name the biggest 3. And I think you kind of touched on one, which was develop a reputation, about someone who, do they have a track record of doing what they're doing? South Florida is a very, very attractive place for developers, for new developers, people who have no experience, but they just maybe have access to some capital.
Right.
To want to come down and play in the sandbox because they think it seems easy and it's so attractive, why not do it? And it's clearly not. It's not that case, but
They have a harder time, David. You look, there are many developers, many that we work with, the Witkoff organization, Naftali Group, big developers out of New York that have come into this market wanting to be here, recognizing the opportunity here, but bringing the discipline, professionalism, expertise that they had in New York into this market. That's very different than somebody saying, hey, I have some capital behind me, I'm going to go develop a tower. Not to say they can't do it. It's more about the professionals that they associate themselves with. Who is their architect? Who is their general contractor?
Yeah, let's go through who you need to have in the room. Like, if you're going to pull off a project, who needs to be in the room, and who are the people that the buyer should say, okay, I should be aware of who's at the table here, because you get the wrong one.
I mean, look, you need tried and true general contractors that not only know how to execute to the standard that you're representing, but also know how to buy. They know how to buy the product and price the building, and you're not going to get stuck in a scenario where they underpriced a ton of your components that you're now stuck. That was a big issue during COVID, if you remember.
Yeah,
Like, you know,
yeah. Material costs go up, and sometimes developers don't want to lose the profit,
right.
so they'll find ways to cut corners.
And that's something you got to be sensitive to. So I like to see developers that have a lot more at stake than one individual building. And people that we work with, whether it's Terra, Related Group of Florida, Mass Capital, Wyckoff Organization, Naftali Group, Two Roads, they have their necks on the line.
Yeah,
With
and they tend
more
to work with the right builders. I mean, we know who the big builders are. We've
Right.
interviewed them, we've had them on the podcast, and we know that these guys, you can't. They're not gonna roll over and be told what to do. They're like, we build quality, and we're not gonna cut corners for you.
uh, their reputation stands behind it, you know, and there are times where things aren't perfect. And that's when you really see the true integrity of these developers because they'll stand behind their product and make sure that whatever mistakes might have been made are corrected. Listen, nobody's perfect. And sometimes you're relying upon a lot of different people that have hands in the pot to get things done. But I've seen developers really step up to make sure that the ultimate end product is exactly what they believed in and exactly what they would stand behind if it was their own home. And that's another good characteristic. So you want good architects. There's this great phenomenon with Starchitects. We work with incredible, great local architects that have delivered great products. Sometimes you want the pedigree of a world-renowned name to help distinguish the product. By the way, we had a brief discussion about brands. I just want to comment on that because you're right. A brand should only matter if it brings value to the user. There can be value in all kinds of different ways. Being part of an organization, a club, having elements of the brand that are represented in the product, whether it's finishes, elements of style, whether it's association with a hospitality component, which to me resonates most powerfully because that's everything you do when you live. You know, it's
Those are the ones who tend to stand head and shoulders above the rest of the crowd because it's their legitimate business model. It's based on what they do.
they're perfecting lifestyle for years and years and years, and they're bringing that perfection to the forefront. But there's a cost to that, right?
Yeah.
So, you do need to look for what the brand is going to bring to you and make sure that there's value in it. There's also brands that are created. You mentioned Park Grove. It's not a brand as that you would compare it to an Addition or a Four Seasons or a Villa, like a major food group building, but it's a brand that was created. It represented something. It was the lifestyle of the park in Coconut Grove on the water. There's brands that are created, and I think that's another big part of what we do and the finesse of what our company brings to the table, working with the best branding firms, creating a story, creating a lifestyle, having a narrative, and letting that narrative drive the experience of the product. So I do think that's another big part of what we do, and I do think that's a variable people need to look at, and I do believe that it's the developers that have the best pedigree that really understand what that brand needs to ultimately mean for the end user to bring value to them, because they're not in for a onesie twosie type of deal. Let me
Yeah.
just build a building, get out. You know, those developers scare you.
Although it's proven when we look at the dollar per square foot, when we look at the resale, we see those particular brands do really well because, like I said, that's what they're inherently tied to the developer. It's not a flimsy relationship. It's a really,
Yep.
really tight one.
There's a commitment to lifestyle.
When we look, all this revolves around very positive things, but I also know that we've all watched projects not make it out of the ground, not get built. And in your mind, you know, what did they have in common? And did you see it earlier on? I mean, when some of these things don't happen, and obviously I do not expect you to name names and,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to make this easy for you, Jay. I want to make this, you know, this is a real conversation. Some things don't happen. And I think that were there things where you say, I saw that coming? And is it sometimes the financials that you look at and go, yeah, they're just not there?
I love what we do. I have a tremendous amount of respect for developers because they not only have to have the vision, take the risk, but the true developers understand all of the different elements that go into the puzzle. What can I afford to pay for this land? What's the land really worth? What do I actually envision the product being? How much can I sell that product for? Who's my buyer? Those decisions, they can have a conversation with me. They can have a conversation with any one of the experts on our team or any other development marketing person in the world. But those decisions they have to own. I think the biggest mistakes are made on the buy. They overpaid for the land. They assumed they could create a product in a market that wasn't ready for the product that they were assuming they could create. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to the quality of a developer. They're making money for their vision, for their commitment, for their ability to understand all those different elements that to go into the creation of a building. It's not just like hiring a bunch of different trades, throwing them all together and being lucky. That could happen. But the ones that you see doing it time and time and time again, they have a recipe. They know what their thresholds need to be, and then they know what they can create by being those visionaries, by creating those opportunities, and by really embracing markets. And candidly, the bigger they get, the more opportunity they have to shape the market. If you look at some of the markets that we've seen expand, like Pompano Beach, like it's not as hard to go into Coconut Grove and create a product. It's a proven market. It's been
It's just very hard to find the land.
right. Well, now it's a different story. But the ones that are entrepreneurial in the space, when David Martin started building in Coconut Grove luxury high-end products, wasn't as common as it is today. The same thing with Related Group. They've now both based their headquarters out of Coconut Grove. It's become the nexus between all the top private schools in the city of Miami. So the visionaries have the ability to gather more inventory. So they know if they're going to build one product, they're going to buy the land next to that so they can do.
Yeah, these guys are building, and I've observed this, the ones who are doing it right, they are not building buildings, they're building ecosystems.
Correct.
And as I see it from Palm Beach coming down, these areas that previously you said, okay, this is not a surprise, but they really do study, and they're not building for the audience that they hope they might get. They're building for the audience that they know they'll get, they know is either there and hasn't been satisfied. And I think that this is something that when you pay attention to the fundamentals, and this is where this all goes, being aware of the fundamentals and knowing the right metrics, knowing the numbers in the market, knowing the appetite where the buyers are coming from, knowing how deep their pockets are. Once you get it right, it becomes so obvious. I mean, like we look at these projects now that come out and go, of course it did well. That was so obvious. Equally, we see the opposite when we go, of course that wasn't going to work.
Well, sometimes you've got to go back to the drawing board, David. There's projects that we've seen be built now that had predecessor projects on those same pieces of land that never got built. So the developers went back to the drawing board. They reimagined. They went in for greater zoning. They got greater density. They created a different product. They bought more land. There's all the best plans can go to zero if things don't cooperate with you in the market. So you need the right product, the right pricing, the right purchase price, and the right market. Fortunately for us in the state of Florida, we've got a great market. Got a lot of people wanting to live here, a lot of demand for luxury product, which is driving all the other sectors of the market. And hopefully the market will continue to cooperate with us, which I do believe it will. And I think we've got a great pipeline of opportunities to sell. I think that the smartest developers, and I think we work with many of them, are really evaluating, examining, studying all aspects of the market to understand where the gaps are. Where's the opportunity? At one point in time, sort of COVID era and immediately post-COVID, it was vertical residences. I think it was Kathy Strafacci that coined that term, a vertical residence, a home in the sky. We weren't really building condos that were 5,000 and 6,000 and 7,000 square feet pre-COVID. It was a phenomenon. It was a penthouse. Today, many of our units are skewing to a larger square footage size because, as you said, people are living there. They want more space. In the high-end luxury units, we're seeing chef's kitchens that are being built to be the size of what ultimately the normal kitchens are being, because most of the meals are being cooked by a chef. So you're having to evolve the product to meet the demands of the market and understanding what that market is. And I think the key value that we bring to a developer is as much input as we can possibly provide them in the pre-development phase to help them position the product for success, and then as much support as we can provide the sales team and the marketing team during the sales process to execute on that vision.
Yeah, the level of luxury is definitely different, and I'm sure that there's product coming that you've looked at and gone, well, is there where you've gone, wow? I mean, there's what's coming next. There's some stuff, and I know you're not going to tell me what it is, but given the acceleration of product that what we had 5 years ago, that what's being delivered now and will be delivered, a lot of the stuff coming online 2028, 2029. And I'm thinking of Paragon's coming online next year.
Yep.
And you've got the Shore Club that will come out. I'm looking at Rivage, which is another, Elliman product. And all these buildings that are going to then, stack up over the next 4 years. It's a whole other ballgame of product. And I've noticed that every developer, and this is one of the subjects, is calls their product luxury. I mean, for the longest period of time, developers would use stereotypical language of like, this is prestigious and this is luxurious and this is,
It's almost become cliche.
it's become cliched. What's legitimate luxury going to look like by 2028, 2029?
I think what we've recognized becomes most important to a buyer is quality, light, scarcity, and finishes. You can always buy the best appliance, which is expected. But to deliver at a level of luxury, high ceiling heights, great finishes, great view corridors, incredible space planning, the flow of the unit is critical. More and more today, buyers are studying floor plans, and I'm sure you see that as well. They're not just accepting that the primary bedroom is large enough. They're inquiring, show me what that feels like. I want to understand the depth. What is the actual closet system going to be like? What finishes are going to be included? What changes can I make? I think things like technology will help us to enhance the quality of the experience. Really building upon technology. And I'm not talking about AI, I'm talking about like what's in the unit, from audio, visual, really delivering things that are beyond our wildest dreams. The incorporation of indoor and outdoor space, I think we're going to see a lot more. Doors and window systems that allow people to maximize their indoor space while at the same time enjoying the experience of an outdoor space is something that I think is undercapitalized upon.
I mean, like a built-out, what we call like built-out exterior space
Yeah.
at a level
Yeah.
that has gone from
Seamless connection between the indoor and the outdoor with walls and window systems that just fold.
Yeah, so rather than having the big threshold over the lip and seeing, that just the doors go 1/3 of the way open,
Yeah.
now you're talking about the full fold. Like we're seeing this in houses, we're seeing single family homes, and we're seeing the dollar per square foot build out in those. And again, if this is leading in that direction, yes, and we're talking about this like going towards this $10,000 a square foot number, but we're also aware that the build out cost of this is changing too very quickly. I see it in houses. I've seen, and I won't say which it is, but I know a house being built right now that's being built out at $3,000 a square foot for a build out.
Listen, part of the driver behind this $10,000 square foot price point is the cost. It's a very expensive building with limited number of units. It's going to be exquisite. And I think that there's, you made me think about this and I forgot to bring it up. You talk about what's the next thing, right? I remember we're working on with 1000 Group in Terra Villa Miami, which is almost sold out. And I remember Mario Carbone saying, people talk about having a chef's kitchen. This is the only chef's kitchen that's ever been built in a condominium. I think elements of authenticity are going to become the real luxury. The best will have to be the best. The quality of workmanship will have to stand out. If you're going to deliver the product that represents the best in class, you're going to have to expect the buyer to look at every element of quality. Things from the evenness of the grout to the soundproofing of the windows, to the perfection of the connections between pieces of marble. It's not uncommon to see book-matched marble, but it has to be perfect. And the most discerning eye that's willing to pay the highest price is going to expect perfection. Where did it come from? How was it sourced? How was it installed? What were the qualities? You want to know that it doesn't only look perfect, but every cord, cable, wire, structure behind it was laid to perfection. And I think that's what people are going to start to focus on.
I'm wondering if we're going to see a rise of elite general contracting building teams like SEAL Team 6 level installers. Not the general, they will have the general guys who will come in and do the buildings, but then you'll get this elite crew who will come in, who are highly paid, highly skilled, working at a boutique level to deliver what can only be described as what you would normally get from a custom build-out
Correct.
high-level interior design group.
Look, buyers are demanding it already. At the super prime price points, buyers are demanding it. They want perfection, and they want provisions to protect them to ensure that what they're being promised is going to be delivered. And I think our developers are up to the match. I think that if you're a developer of a luxury product in today's market, you've got an opportunity to earn a tremendous amount, but also an opportunity to deliver a work of art.
I believe that too. I believe that the appetite at the luxury level, and I've seen it in the housing market, that I've seen buyers who will come in and say, well, the market right now performs at $2,000, $2,500 a square foot in a dry lot area or 3,500 square foot on the water. But the buyers that I've experienced have actually said to me, I will pay more. I will be happy to pay more than that if you can deliver it. And that,
Look,
I think,
we have a product that we're launching in another market where one of the investors actually came to the developer and said, I want one of these penthouses and I want it before it's even launched, but I want to define the perimeters of the space and I want to define the unit and I want to be a part of the process. I don't care about the price. Flat out, I don't care about the price.
Yeah.
You tell me what it costs, but I want to define what the product is. And I think that if you are that ultra high net worth individual, spending what you have to spend to get what you want is not the issue. It's getting what you want. And I think this market is laying the foundation for the developers to dream it, the buyers to demand it, and the brokers to sell it. But I think it'll be there.
100%. And I think that kind of wraps it up, because when I look at this market, and I was curious to know which cities are at that level. I mean, again, there's only a handful globally. There's only a handful of places where you will see these numbers. Hong Kong, peak trades up at $18,000 a square foot. London, $12,000 to $15,000 a square foot, one Hyde Park. Tokyo, the Aman in Tokyo is $8,000 to $14,000 a square foot. Monaco, $10,000 a square foot. New York, you've got stuff floating around there. Now, obviously there's one-offs. And then as you come down, Dubai, Miami is still further down that
Closed
list.
it.
We haven't closed yet. And again, we've got a number of trades that were $6,000, $6,500, I think $7,000 a square foot for one penthouse. But when we start to see entire buildings which are systematically starting and trading at $4,500 a square foot,
Yep.
that signals. Now, one of the things that I looked at, which again, part of our research and understanding, is the audience. And I'm very much focused on the demography of who the people are. We currently have, we have 180 century millionaires in Miami right now. The interesting stat that I pulled up was that when you look at the San Francisco Bay Area, I think they have close to 400. Obviously, we've got, I think, about 17 billionaires. But to have this appetite, this number of very wealthy people to buy these units, we start to look at the numbers and figure out, okay, will we be able to deliver this at a bigger scale? Or will this be a case of like owning a supercar or a hypercar? It's a handful of things that are hard to build, hard to source, hard to locate. And if you can find one and you're early enough and you dig into it, you might be one of the lucky 10 people in the world that might be able to grab one of these days.
I'm more inclined to lean into that thesis than the idea that there'll be any of these dropping in value. These assets are trophies. These buildings that we're defining today with low inventory, not every asset is a supercar, one of a kind. But ultimately, if you look at cities like Monaco, like some of these other major central locations of wealth in the world, they're all exquisite. They're all places people want to be. And you look at the real estate in London, it's elegant and sophisticated and charming and highly designed. You look at the real estate in Monaco. I mean, people want to be in Monaco for some of the same reasons that people want to be here: taxes, lifestyle. And eventually you get to the point where there's just no more developable land. I mean, we see a lot of developers trying to collapse old condo buildings for lots of good reasons and build new buildings. That won't go on forever. And so ultimately, it'll be harder and harder to find those buildings where the unit owners will agree to sell, which will make the value of those buildings that remain in those prime locations worth that much more. So finding the developers that are creating those perfect products. I mean, some of the old legacy products in our markets are still trading at tremendous values because the product was conceived well. Look at Apogee. I mean, Apogee's got
Yeah.
to be 20 years old.
It's an interesting one because it's still one of the finest pieces of real estate the city has.
Yeah.
And I've got clients
Not even on the beach.
not even on the beach. I remember we sold a unit. We sold actually 2 units this year at Apogee within our group. And I noticed that the buyers came through and they both came from within the building.
Right.
And they like, we do not want to be anywhere else. And I think that as we grow, and the geography question was one that you raised, which I think was important because getting your geography and timing is really important. Too early, you've got to be careful. Maybe the neighborhood hasn't quite developed. Too late, it's obviously the prices are going to go and keep moving. But when I look at the geography and I look at locations, there's some that are simply irreplaceable. Continuum south of Fifth. I'm not be able to replace that. Apogee,
Yeah.
another great location. Large sites. Now, there are areas that, again, you're seeing the whole of South Florida. So I just want to leave with maybe some breadcrumbs for the viewers out there, because they're all wanting to recognize one thing. Where's the next product coming from? Where should I pay attention to? And just from a personal point of view, I know there's a lot of areas that we cover, but any areas that you would be willing to mention that you think, hey, there's some
I look at
centers here that are going to really explode?
I'm bullish on a lot of what's happening in South Florida, in the luxury sector, in the prime sector. I think that some of these markets are maturing more rapidly than others. I personally believe what's happening in North Beach is unbelievable. We're working with Wickoff organization, Ocean Terrace, and we're seeing the attraction to that market, which makes sense, right? You've seen what happened in Surfside.
But they're building an ecosystem as well, because Surfside was, and I'm sorry to interject because I want to hear more of the other areas, but that was an interesting one because that got my attention too. And the reason I believe and I see that doing well, and obviously I know, we've got our team, great team, Bill and Brian, good friends of mine who are handling that.
Eugene Callahan.
Yeah, they're a great crew, but they know the product. And what I really am impressed with is that this is not just about building a building. The same way that when Nindi built Four Seasons, they built this ecosystem, which redefined the entirety of Surfside. Before that, it just wasn't anything really, but that really kind of put it on the map. And then obviously Fina got developed as an area, and then you see this happening. But now Wickoff are doing that with Ocean Terrace, and it's not just a building, there's a hotel, and there's all the retail around the block.
Look, I think it'll contribute towards the re-demising of that space, that whole corridor. If you look at what Crescent Heights and Lefferts, Mendy is doing in the 72nd Street corridor, that's all being redeveloped. It's bringing a new element, a new lifestyle, a new quality. And that, of course, leads into North Bay Village, which blows my mind. And ultimately,
North Bay Village is on my list. North Bay Village, it was North Bay Village. Edgewater was kind of a little slow to start, but now it seems to be getting going. North Bay Village is one of the hottest corridors right now in Miami, and a number of people have said that. So interesting you said it too.
It's like untouched. You have so much opportunity there. The proximity is, like I said previously, like you're kind of on the same perspective as Star Island, the Venetian Islands. Basically, if you run from Fisher Island north, you cut right through North Bay Village.
Yeah.
The views are unbelievable. And with everything that's happening in North Beach, and everything that's happening in the Biscayne corridor from the design district north, makes it a pretty proximate location to live. I also think that area is going to really continue to evolve. I think that we say that the Edgewater district had a slow start, but if you think about it, Edgewater has been developing for decades and decades and decades. What's happened now is all of the infill has come in. So you can now have proximity to all kinds of lifestyle within that corridor, which makes it that much easier. In fact, 29th Street, which is where Villa Miami sits, that corridor between Villa on the bay and the Wynwood district is going to be completely evolved in so many different ways over the next year or so. I think people are going to be kicking themselves that they didn't capitalize on the opportunities to buy at price points that in some cases are sub $1,000 a foot. So when you look at what it costs to buy in certain locations, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a foot, and you look at what you could buy in places like North Bay Village, you kind of wonder, where's the upside going to be?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of developers who are doing the research, meeting with the right teams, meeting with Elliman, asking the right questions, because it's all about asking the right questions. And then recognizing through the right research that, hey, there's a position here that I can take.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, look, I just want to say before you wrap up that there's a lot of great things happening in Fort Lauderdale.
yes,
A lot of
I
great.
don't want to forget. I mean, I know this is a conversation around Miami. You're absolutely right, because I have teams up at, Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale, and that area is changing fast, and we've got a lot of
Rapid.
things going on.
Rapid evolution. And in fact, we're starting to see the price points on single family homes get to levels that were like never before seen in Broward County happening in Fort Lauderdale. And the connectivity for boating is unprecedented in the nation. So I think you're going to see this trend of super prime product trading, not only in Miami, not only in Miami Beach, but it's going to move up to Broward. We've already seen it in Palm Beach. Obviously, the single family home market there is off the charts. We've seen it in the condo space. Our products in the condo market have been selling so incredibly well, and we've got a great portfolio of new product on the market now and good stuff coming. So I think that really it's about the things you're talking about. All of these markets are going to prove out to be great. It's about timing, it's about the right developer, the right product, and really something that suits your lifestyle needs.
Yeah.
I always say, like, we're purveyors of information to help you make good decisions to live the best life you can live. And by listening to people like you, David, and you said you're grateful to be at Elliman, when we came together at the SLS Hotel in the Bahamas and you said you're coming over, it was one of the best days of my career. And it's proven to be one of the best things that's happened to us. Listening to people like you, people that do the research, understand the markets, understand what distinguishes one product from the next, listening to data, that's what helps make good decisions. The rest of it, it is timing. You can't help that. You can't predict that. But I think with good information, you make better decisions and you make successful decisions and ones that help your life.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you. And I think when we get into this process, we hope that it's podcasts like this that will allow people to not just make general decisions, but get hyper specific and get down to that level where they can actually choose the right unit. And it's not always, I believe, about just the penthouses are always the ones that you should go for, because there are a lot of really good units once you understand the lines and identify the irreplaceability, the uniqueness of a number of units and a number of new developments where we can go through and I say it's a line by line conversation, even a unit by unit conversation. Now we're identifying what we consider to be the 10 best new, shameless plug, 10 best new development units you can buy in South Florida right now. A lot of equal opportunity buyers, not necessarily looking one neighborhood or another, looking for a lifestyle. And there's multiple ways that you can do it. Not always exactly the same. My very last question for you, if a developer is listening right now and they got a site under contract and no drawings yet, what's the one thing that you would tell them to do before they hire an architect?
The decision to hire an architect is a very, very important one. I would look at that architect's relationships within the community. Believe it or not, an architect's value is not only defined by the quality of their drawings, but it's the influence they have in helping that developer to maximize the value on that property. And oftentimes what might be perceived as the person that's going to draw the best product may not be the person that has the deepest, most important relationships with the community, both the government officials, the community relations people, to make sure that they can maximize the site. So I would make sure that whoever you hire as a developer for as your architect is someone that has a good reputation in the community, someone that has embraced the community and is going to be able to maximize the entitlements on that piece of land so that you can build the most out of what you bought.
Well said. And I did that because, I know that when we get into it, the right floor plans can make or break a project. And I know that when I look at it right now, the way I'm seeing designs coming out now compared to what they were 10 years ago, it's completely different. And I think this defines the new product at a completely other stratosphere, different stratosphere to the old product. It's night and day, it's generations different. And I think that when people start to look closely at the high level, high quality, well-researched new development product, you will realize very, very quickly, it's not even the same product at all. It's a different animal altogether. And I think this makes a huge difference. Jay, thank you for doing this podcast. I really, really hope that if you have listened to this, that you will make comments below, you'll ask questions. We will try to follow up with all of those questions, as long as they're, proper, legitimate questions. Because the intention here is to constantly get good feedback from the audience, understand the market. We are really just a soundboard to what the audience wants. And I think that the more this collaboration exists, the better the product will get, the better our relationships will get with the developers, it gets with the consumers. And South Florida will deliver exactly what the consumers and the market wants.
Thank you, David. I'm looking
Jay,
forward to it.
thank you. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please stay tuned for another episode of the Better Decisions podcast coming soon.